This is an illustrator. I go by the name 12Drawings, and I've created pen and ink drawings intended to call attention back to the original 12-step literature, which was in Alcoholics Anonymous, a book published in 1939 but written starting in the mid-30s and published in 39. Regardless, I wanted to go back and look at what the meaning of those words were that were used in that old literature, because I think they've changed over time, and I think as I read them, I found that to be true. So this is not based on any word in the big book of AA. So this recording is different than all the other recordings. This one is called Religious or Not. Now, Religious or Not, again, does not come from the big book or from the AA program or any 12-step program. It comes from the 1930s definition of the word religion. I'm not going to read that to you because it's so long and it's exhausting. It's unusual for a dictionary to have a complicated and difficult definition, but the word back then was as tricky as I think it is now. So I'm going to go through each word in the definition and show you a drawing I made for each word. This will be a little bit longer recording than most, but I'm not going to make a separate recording for each of these drawings. The first word is service. 1934, the definition was the occupation, condition, or status of a servant, now especially a domestic servant. So in the word religion, it began with the word service, and it refers to a servant, which I reflected on as I drew it. This is a doorman at some kind of a restaurant. There are people dancing inside, and he's there to kind of help people with the door. They could probably open it themselves, but during this time in history, a certain level of elegance, it was done that way, to have this guy here to make sure that the wrong kind of people didn't come into where they were not welcome. But you'll notice he has his hand out. This is something a slave would not do, is to have their hand out waiting for a tip. That's something a servant does. And I think that's an indication to me that religion is not a slavery, at least not according to the 1934 dictionary. It involves service, where what you do does receive a reward. Second word in this long definition is adoration. Adoration is the act of paying honor to a divine being. You'd recognize the word adore. I adore my dog, I adore my kids, I adore my house, I adore whatever. But this adoration is the act of paying honor to a divine being. Now, I just drew what I thought would be a kind of a general purpose drawing of someone praying or worshiping or meditating. This is no particular denomination. In fact, I wanted it to stand in for any number of possible denominations of any religion in the world. Because this idea of what is the name of God, what is the nature of God, is a big debate, but the fact is, adoration is simply paying honor to a divine being, whether you even call it God or not. The word God, probably as controversial now as it was then, as far as whether people all agree on the same thing or not. The word God in the 1934 dictionary said the supreme being, or a being of more than human attributes. Now remember, we're not talking about the 12 steps here. We're talking about the dictionary definition of religion, and God is one of the words. And what I picked up in the definition was it's a being of more than human attributes. And so what appears to be a white hand here is in fact an empty space. And encroaching on it and actually defining it on all sides are human powers of all sorts. And you can pick through them. There's a gavel here for justice. There's a flower here for romance. There's part of a musical instrument for music. There's a beaker for science. There's a stethoscope for medicine. There's a little football for sports. Diploma for education. Apple for food. Wheat for farming. A little hourglass for time. Fishing. A bullet. Yarn for textiles. Tip of a sharp sword. A dart for recreation, a drill for industry, a paintbrush for the arts, a cigar for smoking, a little cup of tea with a tea ball in it. There's just all kinds of things. There's money, can't forget money. But the supreme being of God is more than all of these attributes put together, or else it wouldn't be God. It would just be some one or more a combination of human powers. The next word is express, to force out by pressure. Okay, I guess I could understand that. And to force out by pressure, all I could think of besides squeezing a toothpaste and having toothpaste come out of it was to show someone who is using an instrument which only works if you put pressure into it here and force the pressure through this trumpet. It comes out as music. So in essence, it uses the force of air and this man's knowledge of which keys to hold down and how to hold his lips while he's playing, to be able to produce something that's none of these things. What comes out is none of these things. So he's forcing something out by pressure. And this is something that I assume in the 1934 dictionary's editors' minds was part of what religion does, is it expresses something, it forces something out by pressure. Worship. This should not surprise me. Worship is a part of religion, as I understand religion. But the definition in 1934 was courtesy, okay, that's being polite, or reverence. Revering is treating with respect, I guess. Courtesy or reverence paid to merit or worth. So worship is, again, as it relates to religion, is courtesy or reverence which you pay to merit or worth. That could apply to a lot of things. If someone feeds you when you're hungry, you could say thank you to them, and that's something they did that was of a merit. But worship, they're leaving it ambiguous. They're not mentioning a higher power. And so here I showed a young lady and a noble lady meeting on a street, and the young lady is showing courtesy or reverence for the approach of this noble lady. And notice the neighborhood's not all that good. I would suspect this young girl lives here, and the noble lady is just passing through. There's broken bricks and rubble on the ground, but there's some respect passing between the two of them. So regardless of where the religion might be practiced, this kind of reverence or worship is possible. Command. Another word that came from the 1934 definition of religion. The act of directing authoritatively. So I don't know a better stand-in for authority that directs things than a police officer. And so I drew him. Looks like he's in or around a jail. There are the keys. He's giving us a direction authoritatively. He's got a gun, and he's wearing a badge, so he's definitely an authority. And this is drawn actually from a 1930s photograph of a police officer, and the gun was turned around in what a cowboy movie would consider backwards. But in fact, this is the way it was worn to do what we'd call a cross draw. You would reach with this hand over, and draw it because the policeman in question was a motorcycle policeman. So I just want to say this is not an accident. It's not turned around backwards by mistake. This is the way that particular officer wore it, and that's the way I drew it. So religion includes the act of directing authoritatively. You don't just turn around, walk away, ignore. There is authority being exerted in religion. There's mention in the definition of sacred writing. Sacred is consecrated, which the dictionary goes on to explain simply means to be made holy, as in your holiness. It's made holy or sacred. And then writing is the act of one who draws or forms by scoring or incising a surface. Now that surprises me. It seems a little more elaborate. Why doesn't it just say to write on a piece of paper with a pen or pencil? I don't know, but they say it's the act of one who draws or forms by scoring or incising a surface. So sacred writing is part of religion, wherever it may be, whatever continent it may be on. So I just drew a kind of a sacred space, I would call it. And here are folks, let's say they are handwriting or hand copying holy texts or scripts or scriptures. And that's what this whole drawing is about, is sacred writings, and that's something that's part of a religious group. Teacher is part of the definition of religion. It includes teachers. Teacher is one who makes to know how. Interesting way to say something. Teacher is one who makes to know how. You figure that out. I'm not sure. I think it's clear. It's one who makes someone else know how to do something. So I decided to go back in time and show two people. These are fictional, completely inaccurate in any historic way. They're probably doing everything wrong here, but I just wanted to show this spirit of elder showing a younger person to do what the elder knows how to do. So he's making this young person know how to do what the elder knows how to do. Maybe hunting bison, I don't know. But that's part of religion as well, is to have a teacher. Pursuit. Notice how short these definitions are. There are a lot of words. I picked 12 words, and there are more of them in the definition. If I could find it, I'll read it to you. But pursuit is the act of seeking. The act of seeking. This is part of religion, is to seek. Now, what's interesting about that is some people sound so confident in their religion, they would say, well, I'm not seeking anything. I've found it. I know the answers. I have the solution. And that's fine, but in the 1934 definition, it included the pursuit or the act of seeking something. The way. This again is in religious terminology. There is a way, a direction of motion, progress, facing, pointing. A direction of motion, a direction of progress, a direction of facing, direction of pointing. You could see pilgrimages, religious pilgrimages. There are certain faiths where you face a certain direction on the compass to pray. There's pointing, directions of pointing, which is to say there's a way of looking and thinking about things that follows a direction that is someone else is guiding you in that direction. The drawing here is of a seabird that's taking off. Some people have asked me what these are. They're not bird droppings. It's like when you see a duck taking off from the surface of water. It's very awkward as it starts to go, and it's flopping in the water, but as it starts to really take flight, the way it touches the water becomes less and less frequent and smaller and lighter until it's finally airborne. And that's a way of indicating that despite all these waves in different directions that it could be going, it is already set in motion the way it's going to go. And that is something that's characteristic of religion according to the Webster's 1934 dictionary. The 11th one was probably the toughest of all the illustrations, just as a side, in case you're wondering. Incumbent. This is strange because I'd only heard it in terms of, there's the incumbent mayor is a person who's still the mayor. They're holding the office now. And the definition in 1934 of incumbent, and by the way, this again is part of the religion definition, one who is in present possession of a benefice. One who is in present possession of a benefice. That's the whole definition. And then in the dictionary, they actually put in parentheses saying, note, benefice is a temporary land holding. So this is getting kind of complicated to me, but one who is in present possession of a benefice or land holding or of any office. Okay, there's the mayor, the office of mayor, but it's someone who's just presently in that position or holding that land. This was a tough one. I thought, who temporarily holds land? And then I realized, well, there are those great old lighthouse keepers who would live sometimes short periods, sometimes their whole life on a property they don't own, but they're tending over a lighthouse. And there's the door leading outside to the lighthouse. You can tell from how substantial the door is that this is tough weather, and here's a big, thick, heavy coat and heavy boots that have to be put on to go out to the lighthouse from wherever this guy's staying. And then there's the barometer and thermometer and humiditor. Anyway, I won't embarrass myself. The accoutrements of being a lighthouse keeper. So this is the incumbent of that office. And the religion definition says there are certain things that are incumbent upon us. Finally, true. The definition of religion included what is true. The definition in 1934 of true was steady in adhering to friends, promises, allegiances, or the like. And I thought about that, and I thought about growing old together. And I could have shown an old lady and an old man, an old couple sitting looking out at a sunset. But that is kind of a sentimental version of true. What came to me, having seen some of the desperate situations that do occur in 12-step groups, where people lose their homes, they lose their family, they lose their lives, they harm other people, they pay the price for harming other people. And it's often true that the last person who will remain in connection with someone like that, who's simply gone too far, will be a mother or a grandmother who raised them and still sees them as that little child, that little innocent child they used to be, even as the rest of the world sees a monster. That's the 12th and final word in the definition of definition of religion, And I go back through them. I don't think any single clear message comes through here. And I will post the definition of religion in the YouTube notes below so you can see where all these words came from and what they add up to. This is 12 Drawings. There is more at the website called TwelveDrawings.com. Thanks for listening.